I'm Professor Samantha Thomas. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of Health Promotion International and Professor of Public Health at Deakin University in Australia. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional lands of the Palawa people from where I'm joining you today. Well, welcome to our first interview in our series celebrating the anniversaries of both the Ottawa Charter for Health Promotion and Health Promotion International. The Ottawa Charter was launched in 1986, and it's really shaped the way we think about health, not simply as the absence of disease, but as a resource for everyday life. The Charter is built on principles of equity and empowerment and collective action, and over the past 4 decades, it has inspired public health policy, practice, and scholarship in every corner of the globe. I'm delighted to be joined today by Professor Ilona Kickbusch. Ilona was one of the key architects of the Ottawa Charter and is a tireless global advocate for health promotion. Ilona was also one of the founders of Health Promotion International, and today we're going to reflect on the Charter's creation, its impact, and what it can teach us as we tackle new challenges for health and well-being. Ilona, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us to mark this special occasion.
Well, hello, Samantha, and thank you very much for having me, and I really look forward to this conversation.
So, first of all, I guess, how does it feel to be celebrating 40 years of both the Ottawa Charter and Health Promotion International at the same time?
Well, it feels great, also because, when we were speaking about developing the Charter, and we'll be talking more about that, we felt from the start we had to put in place a number of pillars to be able to continue the work on health promotion. And of course, having a journal was one of the most obvious, since many of the people involved were also researchers, and we were very aware that we needed to build the evidence base for health promotion as it developed. So bringing the two together, the Charter and the journal, has been a very, very important step. And of course, one didn't know, will the Charter survive? Will the journal survive? And yes, they both survived and both are going strong.
So for listeners who might be newer to health promotion, could you briefly explain what the Ottawa Charter is and why it remains such a foundational document in public health?
Well, the Ottawa Charter for Health Promotion was adopted in 1986 in Ottawa, Canada, which is why it was called the Ottawa Charter. It was an initiative by the World Health Organization, and particularly its then Director General, Halfdan Mahler, who wanted to concretize parts of the very, very important Alma Ata Declaration from 1978. And he wanted in particular the parts on well-being, promoting health, prevention, and in particular the intersectorality, as it was called then, that other sectors also had a responsibility for health, to take that forward. And in particular, and this was so important for Halfdan Mahler, the role of communities, the empowerment of individuals. He wanted a WHO document that really expressed that, because for him, that was central to primary health care. And he was worried that for many who were working on primary health care, the word care became more important than some of its other elements. And we'll talk more probably about how I got to be involved in that. But that was his political intention. And I think his personal support and work in member states of the World Health Organization, etc., then helped make the Ottawa Charter a really important document to shift thinking in public health prevention and establish health promotion.
So let's go back to 1986, the year the Charter was created. I'd really love to hear from you about the global climate and the kinds of conversations that were happening in public health at the time. So, what were some of the things that people were talking about, and what were the challenges and opportunities that set the stage for the Charter?
Of course, it was a very special environment, and it's sometimes hard to bring across because many of the people, working in health promotion today weren't even born then when the Charter was written. And of course, we had a strong interest to write something that was future-proof. We didn't want to write something just for the here and now. But of course, we were driven a lot by what was happening in the here and now. And there were several concerns, some I've already mentioned, around the healthcare system not being focused enough on prevention and health promotion. There was also a great concern about prevention becoming very individualized. And that at the time was driven very strongly by big programs, surveys, etc., in the United States around heart disease and smoking and alcohol and other things. And we felt that WHO stance, and I worked with the WHO at the time, was to move away from victim blaming. I had already mentioned the context of the alma mater, but of course it was a time we just come out of the big social movements. Remember 1986, the HIV/AIDS movement started. The women's movement had been very strong. People wanted empowerment in health. And WHO, and particularly Dr. Halfdan Mahler, were very, very committed to this empowerment. They built also on critiques of the healthcare system by strong individuals like Ivan Illich, who was a personal friend of Halfdan Mahler. It was the time when new approaches to learning and education, and today one would say decolonization, that were in the air, which was Paulo Freire's approach to empowerment of disenfranchised people. So there was an air of change, and we were able to ride on that environment of change. And some countries, which is why we were in Canada, had started to look more closely at health promotion, moving away from purely individualized prevention. And Canada was one of the first countries to establish a Directorate of Health Promotion in the Ministry of Health. And it was important that we go to a country that was also an example, a model for how one could move forward.
It sounds like an incredibly exciting time, and you were right there at the heart of all of those conversations and discussions and decisions. Can you tell us a little bit about your role and I guess what was going on behind the scenes? What was it like to shape a document that would go on to influence public health thinking for decades?
Well, it was extraordinary. I had joined WHO formally. I'd been a consultant before in 1981, and I had the task in the European office of WHO to develop a concept of lifestyles and health, and a new approach, as it was called at the time, to health education. And the new approach to health education that we developed was to move beyond health education into the field of health promotion. And in 1983, I had to present this new concept to the member states of the European region. And Dr. Halfdan Mahler was there. He always visited the regional committees. And after I had presented the document and the member states had discussed it and approved it, he came up to me and he said, "I think I have a task for you." And here was me, a very young professional, and here was the Director General. And so I said, well, I think you'll have to talk to my regional director. So Halfdan Mahler, of course, was Danish and came to Denmark regularly, where the European office of WHO is. He came and we had a joint discussion with our then leadership in the European office. And very important here was Dr. Joe Asbal, who led the European office at the time. And so basically I got the task to develop health promotion on behalf of Dr. Halfdan Mahler and the WHO headquarters in the regional office. At that time, Dr. Mahler was exporting global programs to the regional offices to have more cooperation. And so I got started, and I identified individuals, researchers, organizations who were ready to embark on that journey. So between 1983 and 1986 November, we developed health promotion in a sense, both from theory, from practice, and from, I should say, future thinking. There were organizations also in Europe, like Heartbeat Wales, that played a very important role. John Catford, of course, also one of the founders of the journal. People like Don Nutbeam, who I think has written the most important article in Health Promotion International. So we got a fantastic team together, Heather MacDonald from Australia. So it was quite a group of people that tried to move the field forward. We had enormous number of meetings at the WHO and at the regional office. And at that time, one very important other thing was happening is that the European office was writing targets for health for all. And we had the opportunity to use the work on those targets. We had a whole section then on which was called Lifestyles and Health. We had to keep that term, but the whole work was health promotion and basically reflected what was to become the 5 action areas of the Charter. So there was an interface and also another interface which was absolutely critical with Canada. I had mentioned the Health Promotion Directorate. That, of course, built on the Lalonde report. And our regional director, Joe Asbal, had very close ties to Canada. And the Lalonde report was one of the models, in quotes, the kind of thinking we wanted to reflect in the targets for Europe, and particularly in that section. And I might add, it was through the advocacy of the people working on the health promotion section that actually the very first target in the European Health for All targets was to reduce inequity. So already then, the way health promotion worked was to say, well, let's shape our own house, but as we do that, let's be sure to let's make sure that health promotion thinking is reflected more broadly. And so I got that role. I was successful. We did get the Ottawa Charter. Then I was able to run a health promotion program, then a health promotion division. Then I moved into headquarters. And so I was able to help shape health promotion throughout the organization.
One of the things that I guess has endured from the Charter is its really powerful language, especially this call to enable and mediate and advocate, which I know is a word that you and I particularly like. Can you tell us how those words and that philosophy took shape during the drafting process of the Charter?
Yes, definitely, because a number of us, as I said, came out of the social movements. I was actually originally hired by the European Office of WHO to work on building links between the women's health movement and the WHO European Office. The self-help movement has started. I'd mentioned the AIDS movement. And I had been able in my work in WHO, as I said, I started in September 81, to actually innovate in the sense that I brought representatives of these movements into the holy halls of WHO for the very first time in the European office. And that was quite an internal fight now and then. But for the first time, we had representatives of the AIDS movement, of these other movements, patients' movements, etc. And we tried already to push this, what we call the social concept of health and the social concept of health promotion. And so coming out of the movements, we said when we formulate the charter, we cannot only speak of the action areas, the content, the issues, we also have to speak about the process and to make sure and to say, if you're a health promoter, these are three things that you will always need to keep in mind. You know, empower people, advocate for health, underlined health, and enable through other sectors, through moving beyond the health sector, enable health in this much broader way, but also be supportive. You know, health promotion was not considered to be a top-down activity. We're going to force you to do X, but we want to enable a society that is more focused and more supportive of health.
It's very clear that the Charter was visionary right from the start, and you are absolutely central to that vision. But I guess, of course, the real test is in the Charter's influence over time. Looking back now, what stand out to you as the major achievements linked to the Charter's principles and values?
Well, as I said, we from the start, and that was particularly my role, I should say, we already, as we were working on formulating the charter and creating a consensus, we were thinking about the future. We were thinking, how do we keep this energy going? And of course, the journal was one of the things saying we continue to need to build evidence. But then we said we need to build action from the start. You know, it said health promotion is a process. So, you know, we were attacked by all these people. Process, you know, what's this? And so that's why we developed the settings projects. And we said, you know, with the settings projects, health promoting schools, health promoting cities, etc., we can show how societies, how communities come together in a process for health. And it turns out that many of the networks that were then established are still alive and kicking today, you know, 30, 40 years later. It's absolutely extraordinary. So we were able to create a sustainable way, which was you know, constantly reinvigorating and reinventing itself to bring the message of health to different settings, to different parts of societies and communities. So this was one of the ways. The third way was to say, we've got to bring the global health promotion community together. I might add here, many people have criticized the Ottawa Charter in saying, well, it was mainly people from the developed world that initially developed it. But that was actually a task given to us by Halfdan Mahler, because he said the Global South, we didn't use that term then, but the Global South understands alma ata as being intersectoral and health promotive. The developed world does not, because it's become so medicalized. So the strategy was, you know, first address those medicalized global North people, and step by step bring together the experiences of the global North and the global South. And then, you know, start that process also that the global North can do a heck of a lot to learn from the global South. And increasingly, for example, The method we developed for that was to say every 2 to 3 years there should be a global health promotion conference, and that should move around the globe and pull in more and more expertise, experience, knowledge from the global south. And that's exactly what we did. And I think that was part also of the success story. Because if you look at the cities and the countries in which we were able to do that, you can see that the experiences of these countries were integrated. And to take the example, the first follow conference in 1988 was in Adelaide, Australia. And that gave voice to the indigenous communities, something that had not been considered. And then, we moved around the world. We had important meetings in Jakarta, in Bangkok, in Nairobi, in Finland. And each of them focused on one of the action areas of the Charter, trying to go deep, very important. But of course, always showing that these 5 action areas always integrate. And I tell you, at points in time when health promotion was not so popular, the fact that one would need to organize another global health promotion conference created the energy again. Also with director generals at WHO, for example, it was very important to do the big global health promotion conference in China. Dr. Chan stood totally behind it. There was a strong commitment from China to work on healthy cities within China. So we were able to really, if you look at that scope, it has become a truly global approach. And the interesting thing has been that in going global, the Charter was actually reinforced. Because, from the start, of course, using Illich, using Freire, reading, what was then called the liberation philosophy, and integrating that, thinking of Foucault, for example, and others, and the emancipation movements in the Global South, bringing that thinking into community action, into, explaining it needs a different kind of environment to generate health. And that's why we were able then, without major conflict, with criticism, yes, and that's, it has to be, we were able to really create a global approach. And that, of course, was a process, but a very participatory process. And that was essential. It wasn't, some WHO experts and bureaucrats sort of rewriting something or whatever. It was bringing the experience in. And if you look at, the strong health promotion in Thailand, for example, my gosh, there are few countries that can show as much success as the Thai society can.
Can you share a couple of examples of global policies or programs that you think really truly reflect the Charter in action?
In a way, that's difficult to do because I have often talked about the rhizome effect of the Charter. And that is, there's loads of health promotion out there, but it's not necessarily called health promotion, but it works to health promotion principles. And this was one of our concerns from the start. The subtitle of the Charter is Towards a New Public Health. And we said, we don't want to see new health promotion palaces. We want everyone involved in health to work to health promotion principles. And the more these networks developed, the more the thinking of the Charter began to influence all kinds of areas that were dealing with the health problems that countries were facing. So, of course, working on tobacco control and finally having the Framework Convention on tobacco, wasn't a thing that a small health promotion unit at WHO succeeded in doing, but it was the application of a way of moving an agenda forward. It was a way of moving, for example, smoking into tobacco, and moving it from individual smoking behavior to policies and regulation and taxation, for example. And so if you go through the history of public health, the experiences, the strong influence, for example, without health promotion in WHO, one would not have had the Commission on Social Determinants of Health that became so important. We've had, I've already mentioned, the healthy cities throughout. We've had this strong influence on taking communities more seriously in WHO. And, now you have youth councils and women's councils and whatnot. So for me, the issue is not, do we have a health promotion department and, big thing. The thing is, what strategies at this point in time help us move the health promotion agenda forward? And I think the Geneva Charter tried to do that very well with very strong input from the Global South to also say it's very necessary. When we wrote Ottawa, for us, it was automatic that health also meant well-being. But it's become clear that the way health has become medicalized, we now explicitly have to say Ottawa is about health and well-being. And that's then what this charter took forward, what linked also something we had in the Ottawa Charter, but has moved forward now, like the WHO Council on the Economics of Health for All, the well-being economy thinking. All that kind of stuff is actually taking a health promotion agenda forward. That's not to say, health promotion wants to say, we did all of this as an area of expertise, but it's showing that what we tried to compress into that charter was the start of a movement of doing health and public health differently. And there are many fathers and mothers and drivers of this, one couldn't name them all. And that's the fantastic thing about it. And I think that's what we have to celebrate when we celebrate 40 years.
And of course, alongside the Charter's anniversary, we're also celebrating 40 years of Health Promotion International. How has the journal advanced the Charter's vision over the decades?
Well, first of all, it was able to document what was going on. And it was always difficult to find a balance because as a field tries to establish itself, you want to have really, really good research, but also you have to sort of document what people are doing. And not in all cases can you yet 100% say, this was the outcome or that was this effect or something. So the journal was always very, very challenged to sort of be of high quality so that as a journal it is accepted, which of course meant that health promotion was accepted and, things like you're very concerned with impact factors and all of that. And for a while it lost a bit of that. And I really want to congratulate you, Samantha, for, pushing this forward again. So we've always had to show, this is really serious stuff. This is good research. This is evidence. But at the same time, we've always had to use the Charter, particularly through the editorials, to set new agendas. And, I've tried that in my way, for example, with the digital determinants of health. And to then hear from others how they are working in these future-oriented things. And then to be able to bring in the voices from the Global South, to be able to give a space that might be slightly different because their research structures are not that well established. So the journal has always played, and you have to balance that, has always played these different roles: promote a field, promote research, share experience, give voices room, and I think it's just absolutely important to have that kind of of venue, I should nearly say, of a setting to do that. Of course, there's also other journals on health promotion now. There's also such journals in particular countries and language groups. That's very important, that decentralization. But I'm very happy that, particularly in time for the 40th, that the journal has so much good news to share about the journal, that's really good and extraordinary. And so the 40th anniversary of the Charter can help the journal and the other way around.
Well, thank you. It's an absolute privilege to be the caretaker of this journal for a little while. And you and I both know we have a wonderful, wonderful team from around the world who's helping guide the journal at the moment, especially our early career researchers who really bring such energy and new ways of thinking. So I'm particularly grateful that we have such a great team of younger academics involved in the journal as well. Yeah. So milestones are really important moments for reflection. And I was wondering, was there anything that you might have done differently in the development or promotion of the Ottawa Charter?
Well, tricky question. I mean, one thing I've always said is we should have perhaps taken the time to explain more and write more about what one might call our theoretical base. We didn't do enough of that. And it shows up now because many of the things we sort of brought into the Charter, because, many of us were also social scientists. We were a really interdisciplinary group. We had philosophers, social scientists, medics, environmental experts, etc. So NGOs, of course, and all of that. So we brought so much thinking together. In the Charter, that thinking was then maybe expressed through one single word. And we did not spend enough time to actually show the wealth of thinking that's gone into this. And why do I say that? Because on the one hand, I'm absolutely delighted that some of this thinking is, coming up again in new ways, in new contexts. To give you a concrete example, the fantastic Lancet Commission on One Health. And, the Lancet Commission picks up so many themes from the Ottawa Charter, and particularly pushing for a socio-ecological approach to health. Fantastic. Now, we wrote in, supportive environments. We wrote about, Trevor Hancock was absolutely responsible for this. We wrote about the socio-ecological approach to health, but we never sort of, had the time or the inclination, or I don't know what, to really dig deeper and say, this is what we mean with it. We were very focused on the 5 action areas, and the 3, strategies, and we worked hard to push those. And in the environment we were in, what was really, really critical is to get action here and now. And that was particularly important in terms of, this integrated community action, and even more important in what we called healthy public policy, and which was afterwards called health in all policies. And you know that the second health promotion meeting in Australia, then in Adelaide, was focused on healthy public policy. and all the issues that need to be addressed then. And so I think, some of that deep thinking that we had actually done and brought into this, 4-page document, that we should have done more to explain where it came from, because I think then even earlier on, we could have built more alliances throughout society. And, I was saying to the chairs of the One Health Commission, I said, well, maybe if we were writing the Ottawa Charter today, we would call it the One Health Charter, because all these elements were, of course, there. And particularly, the second action area, supportive environments, is so deep with social ecology, with the impact and the integration of people with their environments. It was absolutely future-oriented and has, in a nutshell, to some extent, the things we are discussing in planetary health today, which is why I feel so optimistic. I feel you don't always need to call it health promotion. It's about a new public health. And for me, planetary health is a new public health. For me, One Health is a new public health. And if health promotion can contribute to that, and if it happens to have another heading, well, what do we want? We want a more healthy society. We want well-being. And I'll work with anybody, no matter what they call it, to take the health promotion principles forward. And I think to some extent that, and now this is a bit broader critique maybe, to some extent, health promotion has sometimes focused too much inward on itself. And that, to enable, to mediate, to advocate is to go out there into society and to work with anybody who's pushing health forward. And of course, it's been really important to have, health promotion departments and health promotion degrees and, all of that. You need that to be able, to spread it like that. But I think, this moving into society, of being part of movements, new movements, of being critical of policies that don't take health and well-being seriously, some of that needs to be strengthened again. And I hope on occasion of the 40th, we can build those alliances.
It's a great segue into the fact that we're now dealing with very complex issues like the climate crisis, the commercial determinants of health, digital misinformation, and widening inequalities. How do you see the Ottawa Charter's principles helping us to navigate this next chapter?
Well, let me say, the world was complex then as well. I think sometimes we're overdoing this. The world is so complicated now, and we have a polycrises, etc. I mean, just think back to 1986 and the AIDS crises. That was a total complexity there was an enormous threat. And it was the start of one of the strongest public health movements ever, the AIDS movement. And so I think, point one, health has always been complex because it's a mix of the environment, of individuals, of communities, of so many determinants and factors. And I think the important message of the Ottawa Charter is we need a systemic approach. And one of the things we health promoters were also, particularly in the early days, particularly criticized for, was because we spoke about that complexity. One of the strongest influences on health promotion and its thinking was Gregory Bateson. Gregory Bateson with the notion of the pattern that connects. And the issue, therefore, is which is the pattern that you need to create for health. So it wasn't about simple a causation, but to actually say in order to have a healthy population, there needs to be a pattern that needs to come together. And I think now, particularly through the planetary discussion, this notion of the pattern, but also, as I argue, the notion of the tipping points and the boundaries is becoming more important. As you know, in 1988, I wrote a little book called Good Planets Are Hard to Find. It's actually the very first book booklet on planetary health. It didn't interest anybody. And maybe, I should be also self-critical that I didn't try to push that part of the health promotion agenda more because, I was responsible, at least for what WHO was doing. But I think, again, that's where we want and need to move forward, and where the Ottawa Charter is a gold trove. I mean, I myself, I sort of sit down and read it every 6 months or so, and I said, we really said this? Wow! I'm surprised myself. And of course, if I can just add that is the outcome of the process of the Charter itself. So of generating it. So first of all, that 3-year process of involving so many people, and you might know we had an intermediate document called the Concepts and Principles of Health Promotion. And that then was the basis for developing the Charter. But the Charter, we took the document of the Concepts and Principles, we took the people in Ottawa at this hotel, and we said, now use the Concepts and Principles and write a charter. It was totally participatory, totally. Actually, I had a fight with Halfdan Mahler because he said it won't work. And I said, Halfdan, who's saying participation? You. So we're going to make it work. And I mean, those were the days. Another reason we went to Canada was because they promised us 20-word processors. Think of technology then. So we were able to rewrite the document every night while it was being produced by the working groups and everything. When I read out the charter at the end of the conference, the last bit was still being written. So if you look at the film, I have this long computer sort of thing that we had at the time to read out from. And thank God we had a snowstorm. So everyone stayed in the hotel. And, at that point, you had these hotel room doors, which had that slit below. And so every night we reworked the charter, and we put the new version under each hotel room door. And so in the morning, people could read it over breakfast, the working groups could continue, etc. So I think this this breadth that the Charter brought in is very, very much due to this participatory process. And that's why I totally believe in these kind of processes and always defend for them and fight for them.
Many of those watching or listening to this interview may be just starting their careers in health promotion. What is your advice for the next generation of health promotion advocates?
Well, first of all, be yourself. I mean, believe in yourself, set the new agendas, fight for these new agendas, and you are the future of health promotion. And I mean, I'm lucky in the sense that, point one, I was so young when I was asked to do this, that I'm still around, and also lucky that trying to live with health promotion principles, I'm still around professionally active, so I can still contribute. And I can't say what a fantastic gift that is, really. But it's the new generation that needs to shape this. And so be courageous in shaping it, be bold, tell us, this is not that important anymore. We want to move in that direction, and be ready to, fight out a conflict. This is a societal shift. We are trying to shift societies to take health seriously. And we have not been as successful as we hoped. We have the obesity crises. We have the environmental crises. We have, I could give you a list like this, speaking about, your question about the complexities. And we have to continuously fight for health and well-being. And it is a fight. It is a battle. The counterforces are so strong, particularly if you look at the digital determinants now. And we constantly, and this is what my ask also of the young generation is, to really have this focus on the one hand on the determinants, on the participation that is needed, and also the responsibility of countries, of states, the need for legislation in many areas, the health in all policies. I still prefer the healthy public policy, because it basically tells you all policy needs to have the well-being of people in their focus. And it was an American political scientist, Nancy Milio, that helped us develop this concept. I'm a political scientist myself, so I liked it. But it's really, I think in this, you spoke about all the crises. I think we're really at a very, very critical point in time where legislation, regulation, working to common principles, etc., is being weakened. And, and it's not just the international rules-based order. In principles, it's a society without rules. And I think this is where the new generation has to define how it wants to live, how it wants to promote health, and already now to think about what they want for their children.
And finally, what gives you hope when you think about the next 40 years of health promotion?
Well, what gives me hope is that we've, not only survived so far, but we have actually shaped health and health policy. And I think, if health promotion continues to set agendas or to be part of agendas that have been set and to drive it forward, we've seen in the environmental agenda how over the last couple of years, health has become more central to that agenda. It wasn't part of it initially, even though, we said so in the Ottawa Charter. And obviously, we shouldn't always go around saying, oh, we said so in the Ottawa Charter, even though I love saying that. But it is also saying, we do have instruments. And I often say, if I look at research over the last 40 years, and also look at research following, for example, the COVID pandemic, we can see that the principles of health promotion stand 150%. Let me take COVID. We needed health in all policies. We needed an environmental approach. We needed people to understand, what exponential growth meant. We do need health literacy, but a new type of health literacy. We needed the reorientation of healthcare services. And most of all, we needed community action. And we have a very, very dangerous separation between a health promotion agenda and a pandemic agenda. I've tried to write about that. There's a fantastic report from the Canadian Public Health head about integrating the Ottawa thinking with pandemic thinking. And it's a tragedy. You look at the new policies following COVID-19 and what has been dropped: health in all policies, health literacy, community action. I mean, this is a scandal. And this is where health promotion needs to be. You know, WHO called in anthropologists to work with them for the pandemic instead of going to their own health promotion department. So I think, you know, there's still so much to do, and that's what we're there for. And so it's tough, but coming out of a social movement, you know, part of the fun is the fight.
Professor Ilona Kickbusch, thank you so much for the conversation today. And thanks to everyone who has joined us for the start of Health Promotion International's special collection, celebrating the 40th anniversaries of the Ottawa Charter for Health Promotion and the Journal. We hope you all continue to be bold, brave, and outspoken in Ottawa Charter at 40 debates, events, and social media activities in your own countries, and you continue to advocate for a fairer and healthier world.
Thank you, Samantha.
Thank you.